thought about then I have to like bend over and oh, it's so hard to push. Yeah. Good to go, man? Okay, cool. Hey, can everyone hear me in the back? Are we good back there? Really? Sure? Okay, cool. Thank you guys for coming. We're going to talk about backdooring Git. Before I can really actually say anything, more to protect myself than you guys. These words are my own, not my employer, future, past, or present, and yeah, nor anyone else's. So thank you guys for coming. It's pretty darn cool to see you guys in here. It's interesting. I haven't really been to the Midwest to present at all, and I'm used to West Coast or international conferences, but to see the community that's surrounding here at Derbycon is actually really interesting, and I'm really happy because I'm from the UP of Michigan and other places like that. Just see just one other person who might be a script kiddie hell was like, oh my god, dude, let's take over the phone system. So yeah, it's pretty fun to see all these guys here. So yeah, I'm John. I like to break into stuff. I like to do things. I work at NetSuite. We do some pretty cool stuff there, and that's what kind of led to this talk was, hey John, we need you to break into our Git repository. And I'm like, why not? Sounds like fun to me. And hey, maybe here at Derbycon we can share a few of these little thoughts with you, and you guys can learn how to break in or vice versa. Not, because when you think about it, a backdoor, it's interesting. Some people think it's functionality, some people think it's a feature, or so we won't necessarily want to go into that part of it. But as you might imagine, we're not going to be talking about the entire software lifecycle. We're not going to be talking about how SourceForge decided, hey, I need to make more money, so I'm going to backdoor all of the executables that I'm able to distribute advertising for financial gain. Now we're going to be talking about that, or release engineers who are like, oops, I'm just going to iterate this backdoor over here, or other such. No. We're going to focus on the repository. But the interesting part is there's so many version control software systems out there. So I'm not going to talk about each and every one. I may talk in a few in here and there by anecdote, but for the most part, we're going to be focusing on Git, hence backdooring Git. Now the interesting part is when you look for really visible backdoors, in the earlier days of the BSD community, there's a software group that was compensated for working on VPN, or Open VPN at the time, and they were working these modules and so on. Then a community flare-up happened a few months later where, hey, our NDAs have more or less expired with the FBI. They paid many of us to introduce these backdoors, look at these developers' commit histories, and really audit that. So instead of saying, ooh, backdoors from governments or things like that, let's just say the outcome is still negative. So we're going to treat them the same. So setting the stage. The hard part is, what do you pick for a source code manager, or SCM for short? Everyone has their own way. You can look everywhere. As you might imagine, there's a right tool for the job, such as explosives for a building, right? Can anyone tell me what is not the right tool for taking down a building? Someone said a hammer. Where else back there? A nuke? Okay, that's overkill, but technically it works, and everyone else around it, sure. Tank. So unfortunately, you guys did see where I was leading to, but as you might imagine, when developers pick these systems, there's things you can't even imagine. Like here we have guys from Top Gear who decided, hey, I'm going to use military equipment.
Where are you going?
Oh dear. That felt nasty. What happened then?
James crashed into the corner of the house, and now basically you've got a whole house on your head.
Engine running.
May then winched Hammond's tank out, but Hammond himself was still trapped inside. Happily though, because I'd finally house-trained my machine...
Walkies. Yes, good digger.
I was able to mount a rescue.
Bad digger.
Oh, I've scratched my tank.
By now, the professionals had pulled out an enormous lead. So, to try and catch up, I decided to dig even deeper into the military toy box.
Guys,
What on earth is
What?
that?
I'll put some explosives in the house.
You might want to stand back, as I'm now going to do the long walk.
Is that the suit or his pilots that's making him walk like that?
Fire in the hole!
You've only blown the bloody door off!
After that failure, we decided just to use our machines as battering rams.
Come on, let's just get this job done.
So as you might imagine, when you have a hammer, everything seems like a nail. Well, people use that with sort of SCMs more or less. Like, hey, I'm going to store movies in there or binary files or things that was never designed or even contemplated to use. And they will use that for better and worse. So the interesting part is there are right ways of doing things and wrong ways even functionally. So already you probably have some weird bastard SCM where people's like, I'm going to put in large files and distribute from there. So good luck securing it, sure, somewhat, but the interesting part is you have more or less two models to pick from with a lot of SCMs. You have the traditional one source of truth, the one gateway by which people interact or authorize or not authorize perform operations, where more or less the source code is stored. Or you have everybody's and nobody's responsibility where, hey, I can pull from you, you can pull from me, and copies of it are everywhere. So if you think from a security practitioner perspective, the traditional model is very attractive. You know, do work once and only do assurance there. While the decentralized distributive nature will be a pain in the ass unless you know how to scale out that way. But for developers, they really love, the distributed model. So when you look at the history, according to Google Trends, of, say, Git, it just goes up and up and up to the right, since 2005. But you see CVS, kind of popular in 2005, then just slowly dies off almost into non-existence. Mercurial, distributive SCM, kind of hits popularity around 2011 and then just dies off. SVN, or CVS done right, according to some people, goes up a little bit and then just dies. So I can't say correlation caused causation, but you just see the popularity of Git and other distributed SCMs just exploding while the traditional centralized model more or less just dying away for reasons unbeknownst to me. So the hard part is when I was doing all this research is, what the hell is Git? Well, if you're happy with it, it means Global Information Tracker. If you're not happy with it, it means goddamn idiot truckload of shit. So imagine how mad you are already. If you get hacked, think about it, even it just doesn't functionally work. So imagine how Hitler might feel.
Dem Feind gelungen, die Front in breiter Formation zu durchbrechen. Im Süden hat der Gegner Zossen genommen und stößt auf Stahnsdorf vor. Der Feind operiert jetzt am nördlichen Stadtrand zwischen Frohnau und Pankow und im Osten ist der Feind bis zur Linie Lichtenberg-Marsdorf-Karlshorst gelangt.
Mit dem Angriff Steiners wird das alles in Ordnung kommen.
Mein Führer, Steiner konnte nicht genügend Kräfte für einen Angriff massieren. Der Angriff Steiner ist nicht erfolgt.
Es bleiben im Raum Keitel, Jodel, Krebs und Butter.
Das war ein Befehl! Der Angriff Steiners war ein Befehl! Wer schickt Sie? Der Militär hat mich belogen! Jeder hat mich belogen, so hat er gefressen! Die gesamte Generalität ist nichts weiter als ein Haufen niederträchtiger, treuloser Feiglinge!
Mein Führer, ich kann nicht zulassen, dass die Soldaten, die für Sie
Nicht
verbringen...
als Feiglinge! Verreiter, Versager!
Mein Führer, was Sie da sagen, ist ungeheuerlich.
Die Generalität ist der Geschmeiß des deutschen Volkes! Sie ist ohne Ehre! Sie nennen sich Generale, weil Sie Jahre auf Militärakademien zugebracht haben, nur um zu lernen, wie man Messer und Gabel hält! Ja, jahrelang hat das Militär meine Aktionen nur behindert. Es hat mich nur Widerstand in den Weg gelegt. Ich hätte gut daran getan, vor Jahren alle höheren Offiziere liquidieren zu lassen, wie Stalin. Ich war nie auf einer Akademie. Und doch habe ich allein auf mich gestellt, ganz Europa erobert. Verräter! Von allem Anfang an bin ich so verraten und betrogen worden. Es wurde ein ungeheurer Verrat gehört der ganzen Volkes. Aber alle diese Verräter werden bezahlen. Mit ihrem eigenen Blut werden sie bezahlen. Sie werden es saufen in ihrem eigenen Blut.
Bitte gerne.
Meine Befehle sind in den Wind gesprochen. Es ist unmöglich, unter diesen Umständen zu führen. Es ist aus.
So just imagine that. You know, if Hitler's that pissed about just it functionally not working, hey, think what happens if the repo gets hacked later on, how bad he'll act. Now, only if he went more of a distributive model with Git, then everyone would have their source code and the cancer cure, you know, would be everywhere. But pretty entertaining things. Because the sad part is, you know, you typically can't give everyone access to your source code. You know, hey, I'd like to make the world a better place, but hey, they won't give me the source code. Because in reality, a lot of stuff comes down to trust. And a lot of the models about trust is pretty much this network of trust or this ring of trust. You know, since I'm John and I'm awesome, the world revolves around me, just as it revolves around you. And I have friends that I trust. And then they have people that they trust. You end up with this very transitive property of, okay, I kind of trust this person, kind of trust that one. But the sad part is, I'm sure you guys know some great coworkers you work with and some not so great that you would never want to even be anywhere near you if you had the choice of day or time. But the sad part is, to quote someone, since you don't want everybody to write to the central repository because most people are morons, you create this class of people who are ostensibly not morons. And most of the time what happens is that you make that class too small because it is really hard to know if a person is smart or not. And even if you make it too small, you'll have problems. So this whole commit access issue, which some companies are able to ignore by giving everyone commit access, you know, for instance, we see in the IT world is, hey, give everyone an administrator, or, you know, don't worry about file permissions, just 777, sure. It's a huge psychological barrier and causes endless hours of politics. So for 500 Filipino pesos, which about, I don't know, $10, who said this? Come on, it's almost like Monopoly money. I mean, it's not as awesome as Nigerian money, you know, $1 trillion bill, but anyone? Bueller? Okay, good guess. Very popular, outspoken, blunt, open source contributor. A lot of people know. Popular for many projects, two of which everyone uses day in and day out every day. Yes, Linus Torvalds. Not only Linux kernel creator, but also Git. And he has a whole team there behind that. To some degree, but yeah, it's quite funny there. So the interesting part is when you end up with Git, or more likely distributed systems, is you have this one blessed source of truth. And then everyone can pull from it, right? You know, they don't really care if you pull from it. I mean, sure, legal cares, but development, no, let's run fast and loose. But typically developers aren't allowed to push or introduce their changes back to that source of truth. Typically goes to their QA or dev leads or some sanity checking part. And then once it goes through that, then it typically goes to release or some type of automation that says, yep, all the checks and balances are in order. It's not hopefully going to break anything, you know, push it back to the source of truth. So when you get to this kind of model, it gets interesting because it allows not necessarily a complex system, but workflows that typically allow someone to introduce backdoors. So when I tried looking just anywhere in the public sphere, where the hell have there been backdoors? Back in 2003 on a CVS server that the Linux kernel team had just maintained, for the CVS users, there was an interesting change, or actually specifically a set of changes, where if you look at the green, not sure if you guys can see it there in the back, doesn't look that illegitimate. Okay, it does a weird thing, but meh, for this part of the kernel, seems all right. But the unintended consequence of this, if people would have pulled and built from this, is if your Linux program would have had the right flags compiled into it, it would have been granted root privileges. Just straightforward, hi, how can I help you? What would you like to do? Insert a kernel module, or would you like to do other things that are normally restricted to the kernel? And they looked at the history, and they were like, okay, something, whatever, Dave M commits an empty message, so on and so on. So they go, Dave, why did you do this? And Dave's like, hey, it wasn't me. Like, what the fuck? Anyone, please speak up. Well, they never did. Sure, it's got /dotted out of proportion, went everywhere, but they never found out who tried to introduce this. But there really isn't much until, let's say, recently, where they didn't attack the repository Git directly, they attacked the system surrounding Git. So, Rails, Ruby on Rails, very secure. There was this fun little individual. Once again, researchers typically don't have the great or best social skills. So, hey, Rails team, I found this vulnerability where I can manipulate and, set things of my own nature. And they were like, meh, no, that's default behavior. I'm sure everyone else would have changed that default behavior by now. And he's like, actually, they don't. Oh, no, it's all right. Whatever. He knows fact of life. He's like, fine. Hey, Rails repo on GitHub. Look, I just committed this to mainline. And they're like, oh, shit. Okay, it is a problem. And then they went through there and then did that. But most of the time when a lot of the online repos get hacked, it's typically not Git or the repository itself, but typically the supporting systems. I can't tell you the number of times I've seen authentication keys, out in the public sphere, like, oops, and then so on. There's this fun little SSH server someone wrote that when you attempt to authenticate against it, would do a lookup on GitHub for your public SSH key and then see which repositories you're connected to. So going a little bit of the way, and we'll talk later on what that means, but it's quite interesting. So imagine this, you're sitting at work, your manager comes over to you and says, hey, why did you introduce a backdoor into our program? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, there's this nifty little buffer overflow you threw in there. And you look at the repository. Yeah, I introduced it, yeah, that's a buffer. It wasn't me, like, seriously. But no, according to everything, but you see later on in the commit history, Steve Jobs committed this? Okay, that's weird. He's been dead for some time now. Wait, Steve Jobs introduced it many years ago? And then the next message after that is, he touched it again, but recently? Like, what the fuck? Well, maybe it was my friends. Maybe it was my coworkers who really want to, cause me pain and suffering. Maybe it was an evil hacker in a ski mask, right? So don't worry, security will come over and they'll be like, hey, who do you trust? And I'll be like, hey, I trust God, but everyone else has to give me a certificate. Because the interesting part about Git is that they relied on the GPG trust model and a lot of those behaviors to really provide the authenticity of a commit. It's interesting because you can trust people and then they can trust people, and since we don't have much time left, I'll kind of go through it, but just realize you can trust some people and who they trust, or you can trust some of that or trust no one. And at least the interesting part, because the only really choice you get is you can only do one signature per commit. So you have God mode, you have all your weapons on you, you have your cheat codes, and typically it'll embed your signature saying, hey, I did this within the repository. There are ways to kind of break it out, but for the most part, all of your signatures are embedded in there. But the interesting part is when you sign a commit or, hey, this change, you effectively have 4 choices you can make. If you have a commit that has tons of other commits behind it, you can be like, hey, I'm going to sign each and every one. Okay, cool. But if you have hundreds or thousands, that's a pain in the motherfucking ass. If you just want to sign it saying, hey, I'm going to take all this, bundle up together and say, yes, I agree, this is all good, sign it. It's quick and dirty, but hey, the back door will still get in. It doesn't prevent police from coming to your back door being like, hey, what happened here? Or you can just kind of flatten all those changes together in just one big diff. And be like, hey, yeah, I don't have to do anything. But then you miss the history of how it got in there, who did what, and then everyone will come and blame you for someone else's problem. Or you can do typically what I see Google engineers do when their Git repositories go down is start taking pictures of their commit, be like, yeah, look, I did it, and then it goes up there and then goes down a little bit later. So it really depends what is the predictable outcome that you want. I mean, if you want the history to be the truth, then sure, flatten the commit. If you want to live on the wild side, then yeah, just sign the merge commit and then people will come back to you later and blame you. Or maybe you just want to sign all the commits, which is cool. It's awesome, but being a developer and myself personally, I'm going to be rather lazy. I'll just auto-sign it. Just like everything here, just whatever, sign it all. I don't really care. So the interesting part, since this is also more of an offensive conference, is how do you really backdoor a repository? Well, one of the things that I love to do, which is script kiddie-esque, my coworkers will typically leave their desktops unlocked, right? Or I'm sure our wives and others do as well. So typically I'll end up changing their background to Nicolas Cage and all their Windows icons to Nicolas Cage, right? But imagine this, for your developers where you guys work, they probably are fairly lazy, don't want to enter in their username and password every time they interact with a repo. So just pull up their IDE, hopefully they're not using Vim, and just be like, hey, introduce your changes, and just right-click on the background, and then just push commit, done. Sometimes it literally is just that simple. Or maybe you actually do have to put a keylogger in the machine or physically take over that machine. I won't go into details there, but at that point, you're just impersonating them. So the interesting part, I call it the script kiddie hacking of Git, is you can change your username and email address when you interact with the repository. I mean, this is straight up script kiddie stuff. You're like, hey, I am Steve at apple.com. Do some work and then impersonate someone else. So if we look at this history there, evil backdoors introduced by Tracer T. Later on by, President of the United States at whitehouse.gov and so on. If someone were to look at this history, they would start pointing fingers at them, even though obviously there wasn't. And there's no signature saying, hey, X. But the interesting part is maybe I get a collision. Maybe there's a way, because the interesting part about Git is it has this tamper evident feature where, hey, I'm going to more or less calculate a SHA-1 hash, and then if you try to tamper with it or previous history, it will be self-evident going down that line from there. But without too much details, if you end up finding a hash collision and introducing your own evil backdoor, yeah, too bad. Git will be like, yeah, I don't care about that new one. I'm going to still stay with the old one, and even then, it will look like gibberish, so please don't sign it. So the interesting part that I really love about Git and people's laziness is they don't want to deal with this huge SHA-1 hash. They typically just deal with prefixes, 5, 6 characters, maybe longer, and that's very easy to manipulate, and it's not tamper evident. Brad Fitzpatrick of LiveJournal fame and a few other things created a very simple Go script that allows you to manipulate any repository and be like, hey, change it. So it's actually quite fun. I'll sometimes do that to my friends, being like, wait, you mean this commit or that one? Like, John, stop fucking around. But the sad part is when you think about overall in the community, there's not a lot of open source projects even using signing of their Git repositories. Hell, even Git itself doesn't. So imagine here, in the top right corner, we have Linux, who signs a lot. Now, mind you, sign commits, just number, and then left just commit. So up and to the right means they're signing and committing a lot. So let's get rid of that outlier. And you'll see Git there, not really signing. The farther to the right you are, the more signed commits you have. So GitLab is signing more than Git. And Ember. That's interesting, because these are the 140 most popular projects on GitHub. I don't even want to begin to imagine everyone else. So when I decided to start going through all these repositories, I ran through static analysis, dynamic analysis, fuzzing. I looked through all the CVEs. Git by itself, just core, it hasn't had the battle tested of time for everything. So it actually has some pretty nasty vulnerabilities still waiting there because CVS and SVN came just squeaky clean. Git itself has some resource leaks, null pointers, integer overflows. I mean, there's still more to be had if you guys want to go into it. But if you guys want some fun little O-Day for GitLab, it's very simple. Has on the wiki page, like give me a wiki, page, give it an ID and version, and it will just load literally from the file system. So you say, hey, give me Etsy password version, whatever the fuck. And it'll be like, does the file exist? Yep, okay, here you go. That awesome. As you guys might imagine, I put a few tools on my GitHub account, Lord AppSec / Backdoor. You'll have the sanity checking stuff. And once again, don't trust the client. Don't trust your weird developer machine to verify commits. On the push request to your centralized source of truth, that's where you verify and trust everything. And I've got some pre-hooks there and a few other scripts you guys want to use for that part. But for the most part, since I've run out of time, thank you guys for coming for that. And yeah, it's kind of fun breaking into it, or vice versa. Sure, there are much easier ways than SDLC, but it's interesting, definitely. So thank you guys.